We're going to take a look at the papers now. As you can see, I'm joined by journalist and author Janelle Aldridge. Great to see you. Morning.
Good morning.
Lots to discuss, Janelle, but I wondered if we could start with a story in the Eye today, a rare intervention from Angela Rayner, coming out and talking about a growing number of young people in Britain feeling hopeless, she says, about their futures. And I wondered what you thought about this. My instinct was, is this a kind of a warning to Sir Keir Starmer? Is this putting the leadership debate back in the spotlight? But behind what she's saying, actually, it's a real worry for young people with challenges, particularly for Generation Z.
I do I mean, when you read the story, at first it reads like, is she positioning herself for something if you look at the political side of it? But if we look at the human side of it, there is a real story here and something that I think is really, really very true. I think it's interesting that it seems like a bit of a rehabilitation talking about the personal life and how things are going. But I do know this story is writ large amongst many young people. How are they ever going to be afford to buy a property with wages being quite stagnated, not growing at the same rate? When we look at some of the stories later about the interest rates, which will make mortgages even harder to get. I do think that there are things that the government could maybe do to look at this problem. In Europe, people don't really own houses. They don't have the same obsession with owning homes as we do here. They rent for life.
Absolutely.
But here, that's seen as like a bad thing. But I do think if you can afford to rent and stay in a rented property for 1, 2, 3 years, you probably can afford a mortgage, which is actually cheaper. So maybe there is something that can be looked at the way we assess mortgages and the way we think what people can actually borrow and afford to pay when people are paying over the rates of rent. But then as we go into another story, that's all about to change as well. But there is a point here, and I do feel sorry for young people.
Yeah, I thought an interesting line that she said, that there's essentially a whole generation of young people who feel no matter how much they do, no matter how much they run on that treadmill, they're not going to make it. And I just found it very interesting. She hasn't really spoken much since stepping down from Cabinet. So my cynic side of me is thinking, well, what's this all about?
Well, I do think it's the humanisation. Whenever you're on because some people say, oh, well, how come your son's so hard up, you know, and the tax issues and all of those different things. So it definitely feels like a local election bid and maybe a leadership bid once the local elections are over, if things go the way people suspect they might do. But in everything, even a stopped clock's right twice a day. So even if she is on a manoeuvre and it's a kind of a rehabilitation, I do think there's something really serious in here that I do think Labour, that would be the party that I think would have something to say and do about this particular issue for young people. You know, you go to the supermarket, I go, you know, you can barely afford to buy, you know, meat's so expensive, everything is so expensive. So I do feel for young people just trying to make it. You can't get an NHS dentist appointment if you're over 18.
Interesting you should mention dentistry, actually, because what's quite rare in this article too is that she's talking about her son, which she rarely ever does. She said that he had to borrow money to pay for dentistry work, which is quite extraordinary.
It is quite. I mean, I went to the dentist after a little period of not going, and let me tell you, the bill that I had was quite intense, and they do want you to pay it all straight away at the time. There is a big problem with affordability and living, and I do think this is something that the Labour government should be really tackling, not just talking about, but finding a way to tackle it, to give young people a feeling that it's worth working. Because if you work and work and work and you still can't afford anything, it begins to feel like a bit of a hopeless pursuit.
Well, this ties in the next story really quite nicely, doesn't it? It's on the front page of the Metro, and new rules come into force today about what you can do as a landlord and rent. So their headline, Mayday for landlords, Janelle.
Oh, it's all changed. You know, I think the weight has always kind of been on the landlord side. I remember looking for a flat in London once to rent, and, you know, there's like 30 people going for the same flat, and it's, well, how much can you give? This was the advertised price, but people were bidding.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so that has happened to me before, where I've been outbid on a flat, or they've got a whole group of people coming to view the flat on one day, and then they're literally deciding who's going to rent it. So this will change in this. There will be no more bidding for flats. The advertised price is the price. No more than 1 month's deposit. And also, if you rent, you now have the ability to just give 2 months' notice to leave the flat rather than before being tied into a year, and also the end of no-fault evictions. And so, apart from if there's arrears. So it's actually a really interesting move. But what it does mean is I think, you know, I'm not against people making money, but if you are renting a property to someone, you actually do have to be a good landlord, because if you're not a good landlord, now people actually have the right to just get up and leave.
Does it tip the balance now?
I think
good
so.
Good for renters, not so good for landlords. I have to say, when I rented, I'm talking about 11 years ago now, in Manchester, we had the best landlord for 4 years, never put up the rent once, never pushed us to, you know, move out because she wanted to get a better price. So I think sometimes landlords do get a bad rep, don't they? I know there's a lot of bad stories.
I've had good landlords who are wonderful, and I've had some terrible landlords who are not so wonderful. But what this means is that good landlords like yours, well, why would you leave? Why would you leave that scenario? But if you have a landlord who's not doing repairs, not fixing things, it's been unfair, pushing up the rent unfairly, well, now you can say in 2 months' time, I'm out, thank you.
Yeah, not good. So all of this ties into interest rates, doesn't it, really? And it's the front page of the Financial Times. Yesterday, we saw the Bank of England hold interest rates at 3.7%, because what they're trying to say is that we're holding it because things may change, and then it will give us a bit of headroom to really react. And the issue here is that Andrew Bailey is essentially saying the clear message is potentially interest rates could go to 6.2% in the early part of 2027. No one wants to hear that, but that's a reality of what we're seeing in the war in Iran. But the message was clear, Janelle. Living standards are set to get worse for everyone.
And that's just such a tough message. I'm now thinking I better refix my mortgage, because in June, that's when they say things really could begin to shift and change for people. And when you kind of hear these numbers, and like sometimes I wonder how financially literate we all are. So we kind of hear these numbers and they're telling us it's bad, but I sometimes think it's hard to understand what it actually means. But food inflation, mortgage inflation, which will lead to some people rent inflation, even though what we've just spoken about, they'll still have the right to raise the rent once a year. And when we talk about standards of living and how young people are affected, whose wages are not going to be rising anything in line with the way the bills are rising, you just see a really, really tough time. And whether or not you think the war in Iran is right, we should have joined, or whatever your politics on it is, it's absolutely having a massive effect right around the world, whether we joined in or not. And the lack of clarity on what's the aim, what's the objective, when's it done, means that it just keeps us in this perpetual state of ambiguity as to what the future looks like. And just at a time when I feel like people were finally starting to get more settled after COVID and lockdown and all of those things, and now it feels like we've thrown back into something, not of our making or choosing again, that's quite disruptive.
There's lots of economic experts were expecting it at this point there might be a cut at this point without the war in Iran. And the issue that's feeding into all of this is that the Strait of Hormuz is still, there's a blockade. Vessels are not going through. But say the war in Iran finished today, look, at 10 to 7 this morning, it would still take at least 7 months for any kind of infrastructure to get back to what we could call normal.
I think that's what we sometimes don't appreciate when, someone's sitting at home like me, watching, is that the price of the oil today, you don't see that today. You see that in 3 to 6 months. So even when it ends, that's what the lag of delay is the way it is now. So it's in everyone's interest that we end this, egos aside.
OK. Janelle, thank you so much for that. We're going to change stories now and bring you the very latest. We told you earlier that a 45-year-old man had been arrested in connection with those double stabbings in Golders Green. We can go live now to our correspondent, Amelia Harper, with more details. Amelia.
Yeah, well, in the last few moments, Essa Suleiman has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. And this is after 2 Jewish men were stabbed here just a couple of days ago. He's also been charged with possessing a knife in public. and he is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today. This is someone who is a British national who was born in Somalia. And just to remember what happened here a couple of days ago, those two Jewish men were stabbed and police were called at around 11:15 a.m. The two victims are 34-year-old Shloime Rand, who has now been released from hospital, and 76-year-old Moshe Shine. And yesterday we had the news that the UK terror threat level has been raised to severe. This was done by a group called the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, and they had raised that, they say, not just in response to what happened here at Golders Green a couple of days ago, but actually in response to rising terror risk, they say, over recent weeks and months. They say particularly from Islamist and extreme right-wing terror threats from individuals and groups across the UK. And what the threat level being raised to severe means is that an attack is highly likely in the next 6 months. And actually the last time that the threat level was raised in this way was actually back in November 2021 in response to a bombing at a hospital in Liverpool, as well as the murder of the Essex MP Sir David Amos as well. And obviously what has happened here over the last couple of days has prompted huge upset, of course, from the Jewish community, and it's actually led to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, speaking out in response. And in a statement at Downing Street, he had acknowledged that the Jewish community were, as he said, scared in response to what has happened. He actually came here yesterday and was heckled by some of the protesters, and the government has said that it has invested, or it will invest, an additional £25 million to support and protect the Jewish community. We will be hearing more from the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, later on this morning, but that news just in this morning that Essa Suleiman, the 45-year-old, has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder.
Hey, Amelia, thank you so much for the updates. More from Amelia throughout mornings here on Sky News. Janelle, this does take us to a double-page spread in the Daily Mirror today, and it's reflecting, isn't it, the fear that Jewish communities up and down the country feel, waking up feeling like they need security outside synagogues, or they can't go to a kosher butcher because that identifies them as Jewish. Where are we as a society that this is happening?
I think it's really, really challenging. You know, in the part of London I live in, there's a sizable Jewish community there. And to feel that the way you present, the way you look could put you at the risk of harm is just so awful, because how can you hide away from what you are or who you are? And so that's quite a scary position to be in. And so any kind of racist attacks that attack people for the way they are culturally, the way they present, the way they look, the way they dress, that is something that we really do need to address, because it is frightening. How can you not do the things that pertain to your faith and those things? So although people might be sad that they heckled the Prime Minister, that's just the strength of feeling they feel. OK. Janelle, thank you so much.
There's one more story we will squeeze in today. It's in the Times. At Spotify, they're rolling out verification just to allow customers to know whether the music they're listening to is AI or not.
I mean, maybe we should roll that out in so many other things as well. But I think it's actually a good move by Spotify. Artistry, human creativity, human intelligence. Oh, my gosh, we really want to preserve that and boost that and allow the creative arts to flourish. But it's so hard to do that when you can't distinguish what's real from what's not. And yes, I'm sure AI can create some great music, but humans can too, and they should be preferenced.
Yeah, they're going to add a green check mark on the music. Janelle, thanks so much for that. Jones and Melbourne, up next.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas had